Welcome. In this lecture, I'll teach you lesser-known facts about layer styles. You've seen me use them from time to time, but now I'll officially introduce them. Layer styles are sometimes referred to as layer effects, and they're added by double-clicking next to a layer's name. You can also do that by clicking this FX icon here. I have a rectangle selected so I can give you an overview on how these work. When I enable a drop shadow, this new window will pop up, and through it I can fine-tune this style. Please note that I'm using CC 2017, so I have some new options compared to Photoshop CS6, for example. One of the new improvements is that I can add multiple layer styles by hitting on this plus symbol. Let me enable a stroke so you can better see what's going on. First, I'll add a red stroke on the outside of this rectangle. I'll go with 5 pixels for its size. Next, I'll add another one. This time I'll make it blue. Currently, they both have the same size, so I'm not seeing both styles on the canvas. Instead, Photoshop respects their stacking order and it's showing me the one on top. But if I resize this to only 2 pixels, you can now see 2 strokes. Each style has its own unique way of working, though most of them have certain settings in common. For example, the opacity of the effect and the blend mode can be found in most styles. Whilst we're on the subject of strokes, let me take the fill down to 0% so I can show you something. I'll zoom in on a corner and I'll disable one of the strokes so we can better see what's going on. If the stroke is set to outside, even though this is a normal rectangle and not a rounded one, this corner will have a curvature because that's how this particular layer style is applied. The more I increase its size, the more rounded it becomes. If you want to prevent that from happening, you'll have to change it to inside. Here, I'll set it at 10 pixels size. If I change it to middle, this stroke is going to add 5 pixels inside the shape and 5 pixels outside it. Let me show you another important thing. I'll change it back to outside and we can see it set at 10 pixels, right? I'll close this window and I'll create a duplicate. I'll zoom in and I'll leave 10 pixels between these two rectangles. I can double check that option with the marquee tool. As you see, 10 pixels. But if I hold the Control key, notice what Photoshop shows me. 30 pixels. Why is that? Well, strokes set on the outside of a shape don't add to its size. So if this is set at 250 by 100 and I add a stroke, those values won't change. That's why Photoshop is showing us 30 pixels. As far as the program is concerned, this effect does not modify the pixel information of this shape. It only acts as an overlay, if you will. If you want to double-check this information, select the entire canvas with Ctrl A. Now use Align Top Edges. If this stroke was an integral part of the shape, you'd expect it to touch the edge of the canvas. But look what happens. The stroke is outside our canvas area because Photoshop only recognizes the edge of this rectangle. These bits of information will help you out a lot because you won't scratch your head thinking, why did Photoshop do that? So remember, strokes don't increase your shape's dimensions. Another important piece of information about layer styles. Some of them don't work together by default. For example, I'll add a gradient overlay. Any one of these ugly pre-installed ones is fine. Now I also want to add a color overlay, but look what happens. The gradient is no longer shown on the canvas, and that's because color overlay is above this other layer style. If you want to use it, you'll have to adjust its opacity or blend mode. Now we can see both of them on the canvas. It's the same thing with pattern overlay. These three can't be used together without adjusting their blend mode or opacity. So next time you try and use them simultaneously, make sure you adjust their settings. Still on these overlay styles, if you enable any of them, your clipping masks won't work. Here I'll add another rectangle above this one. Now I'll clip it with its hotkey, Ctrl-Alt-G. Notice that layer disappears, and that's because you have an overlay effect active. If you want this shape to be clipped, you'll have to use a layer mask like so. Control-click this thumbnail and add a layer mask. Most people prefer to do it another way, though it's not what I'd recommend. They convert this layer that has an overlay to a smart object. Now it retains that gradient, but you can also clip any other layer to it. In case you don't want to do that, there's yet another way. Let me undo. You see all these layer styles here? Right-click this layer and choose Rasterize Layer Style. Now it's no longer a shape, instead it's a raster layer that contains all those styles. Please note that you can undo with Ctrl-Z and you can rasterize this shape without rasterizing the layer styles. This is an important distinction. It's one thing to rasterize the layer completely, including its styles, and it's another to only rasterize the layer. In the second case, you won't be dealing with a shape any longer, but your effects will remain untouched. So you have lots of options to choose from when it comes down to these effects. Okay, let me add a few more styles to this shape. I'll enable them by clicking on this check mark on the left side of their names. For the following demonstration, their settings don't matter. Great, now say this is looking amazing and you want to use the same style on another rectangle. Let me add a new one to my canvas. Here's what you can do. You can right-click and choose Copy Layer Styles. Now go to that new layer and right-click it too. In this list, you'll find Paste Layer Style. And that's the easiest way of doing it, plus it works on any number of layers. If you want an alternative, you can do this. First, let me clear these layer styles by using this option from the list. So this one has a bunch of effects, while this one is completely clean. Hold Alt and click and drag effects over to the other layer. And there you go. Please note that if you don't hold Alt, you'll simply move them without making a copy. As you'll notice, this doesn't do the same thing. Furthermore, if you don't drag around the effects text, you'll move or copy individual styles. So be aware of your cursor's position in this panel. Okay, moving on, you've probably realized you can disable each style's visibility by using this eye symbol. You can disable the whole group by using this master icon here. For me, what's more important is to have a tidy layers panel. So if I duplicate these shapes, you can see how their expanded layer styles eat a lot of my space. Instead of clicking on this up arrow for each one, select all of them with any technique you want, and now use this arrow. This will collapse all layer styles in one swoop. And that wraps it up. I know it's quite a lot of information to take in, but don't worry, we'll revisit some points as we work on various projects. Plus, I've also prepared a cheat sheet for this lecture that has the condensed version of this lecture. Okay, I'll see you soon.